Welcome to this lecture. So the part I'm going to cover in this lecture, I should have done it at the first of the module, but I wanted to show you how the selectors work because that's what makes up a CSS page. So for now, let's come back to what was supposed to be the first part. So let's leave some space here. And now we're going to be using the universal selector. This selector selects pretty much every single element in a HTML page. Okay, so I'm going to be using this selector to give some default values. We'll be using the star symbol. When you use the star symbol, it means you're selecting every element. So that's the universal selector. And then open and close curly braces. After that, let me tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to be making the default padding and margin of the page 0. Depending on the browser you or your visitor uses to access your web page, the browser would give some default paddings and margin values to every element or some of the elements depending on how the browser is designed. Padding basically is space around text and margin is space between an element and another element or the border of the page. Okay, let me show you what these are and let me show you how the browser creates default settings. Okay, let me select this one. Okay, so I'm selecting the header and let's go to the, as you can see here, this area is selected, which is the header. And if you can see here, there is a border between, a margin between the top and the right and left hand sides of the page and this element. Okay, so that's the margin. And then also, if you can see, there's some tiny spacing between the border of the element and this text in here. Okay, so that's the padding. And your browser would give some default margins and paddings. That's why there's space here. So we don't want that. So for that, let me make all of these things 0. Okay, so margin, I'm making all the margins 0, and then padding, I'm making all the paddings 0. Because if we let the browser use its own default stylings, then our styles might get affected based on each browser because each browser has different default stylings. So we're getting rid of all default stylings so we can make our app look exactly as we want. So even though we've given the padding and margin as 0 in here, we can still make the margin and padding for each element different, and that will override this particular value, the 0. Okay, so that's it. Now we've finished the preliminary stylings. Let's get down to the main parts of the app. Let's first handle the the header element of the page. The header element holds the heading tag, this header element. Okay, see, since I selected this, it's selecting pretty much every element of the page. So that's the universal selector. Okay, so let's get to the header element. For that, I'm going to be using the header selector. So header, and then open and close curly braces. So basically, I only want a couple of things for the header. I want the text within the header to be centered. So for that, I can use the text align property of CSS like this, text -align, and I can give the value as center. So let me save this. Let's see what happens. Great. So the tic-tac-toe game heading is centered right now. I also want the header to have a decent enough spacing from the rest of the app and from the top of the page so it looks separate from the game area. Okay, so for that, I'll be using the margin attribute and specifying the value as 50 pixels. Okay, so when I give 50 pixels like this right here, it'll overwrite that 0 value. Okay, so 50 pixels, this will create 50 pixels in margin for the top, left, bottom, and the right hand side of the header element. So 50 pixels each. You can play around with these values of any of these attributes, for instance, to arrive at designs that you want. These are just values that I give because that's what I prefer. So if you want, you can make the margin 30 pixels or even 100 pixels. That's up to you. So that ends the header section and consequently this lecture as well. See you in the next lecture. Thank you.